Chapter 46. A King's Ransom Tempts a Prophet. Toward the ancient land of Mesopotamia, by the upper Euphrates Valley, lived a prophet named Balaam. This man was known in many areas as one who had such a special gift of prophecy that he could pronounce wonderful blessings and great curses upon people. Pronouncements that seemed to be amazingly inspired. He knew about God, but was a tool of the devil. He was a high priest of the pagan religion of that land. Balaam always wanted to see how far God would let him have his own way. A king's evil design. Balak, the heathen king of Moab, heard that Balaam had the power through God to bless people and to curse them. Such a power, he thought, might be much greater than that of any wizard or enchanter who worked through spells and magic and strange mixtures. If this man Balaam could be hired to pronounce a curse on all of this upstart nation of Israel, Balak told his officers, those trespassing people might be so crippled that we could drive them out or even destroy them. We must try every possible means to keep those Israelites away, and therefore I want Balaam to be brought to me. Numbers chapter 22 verses 1 through 6. The king immediately sent several of his princes eastward into Midian, where they were joined by Midianite princes. The caravan then moved on northward to the city of Pethor, where Balaam lived. When Balaam was told by these men of high rank why they had come to him, he felt very honored but quite uneasy. I am a prophet of the Most High God, Balaam slyly said. If it pleases God to inspire me to pronounce these curses and blessings, so be it. But I cannot curse whom he would bless. Perhaps you should make certain what you are allowed to do before you give us a final answer, one of the Moabite officers said. We haven't come here to ask you to do something without a proper reward. The officer clapped his hands, and in came two servants almost staggering under the weight of a metal-strapped box. The lid of this chest was lifted, disclosing a huge amount of pieces of silver and gold. Balaam's eyes widened at the sight of this unexpected display of wealth. Nothing more was said, but Balaam knew that this fortune would be his if he would accompany the princes back to Moab and pronounce a curse on the nation of Israel. He began to hope that God would allow him to reap those riches. In his heart, this wicked man began to covet the reward passionately. I certainly must consult God about this matter, Balaam finally spoke up after an awkward silence. I should like to talk to you more about it tomorrow, if you would be pleased to lodge here overnight in the spacious inn just down the street. The Moabite and Midianite officers took this to mean that the sight of such a rich reward had speedily caused Balaam to give in to their wishes, and they departed with satisfaction for the inn, which was one of Pethor's best. That night, God spoke to Balaam, asking him the identity of the men who had come to visit him. God already knew, but he wanted to test Balaam's wicked heart. Balaam was afraid not to tell the truth. You must not go with these men to curse the Israelites, for they are blessed by me, God told him. Next morning, Balaam met with the princes, whose faces fell when they heard what he had to say. Balaam speaks deceitfully. God has refused to let me go with you to do what you ask, Balaam announced. There is nothing more to be said or done about the matter, except for you to return to your countries. As Balaam later watched the caravan depart from Pethor, he couldn't help but regret that a fortune in precious metals was slipping through his fingers. He wasn't exactly certain that he had been wise in turning down this opportunity to become wealthy overnight. And he hoped Balak would send more messengers and persuade him so forcefully that he would have to go with them. After the caravan departed, Balaam's mind often dwelled on that chest gleaming of gold and silver. Balaam felt that if only his fear of God wasn't so great, he could have become the owner of that chest. Instead of desiring a king's ransom, Balaam should have repented. A few weeks passed, and then another caravan suddenly showed up at Pethor. It was made up of Moabite and Midianite princes of even higher rank than those who'd come before. Numbers chapter 22, verse 15. There were more servants and more animals. The people of Pethor were excited and honored to welcome another assemblage of men of such high rank, and were proud that a resident of their city was famous enough to attract such a group of officers from other nations. Balaam's sudden increase in popularity made him even more desirous of the offered wealth. He was quite impressed with the visitors, especially when some in the caravan turned out to be musicians and dancers, who performed in the street in front of the prophet's home. He began to realize that if Balak made him rich, he could afford to have his own private musicians and dancing girls. Balaam's love of money was leading him into all sorts of evil desires. 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse 10. Following the street performance, the head princes met with Balaam to inform him that the king of Moab had been greatly disappointed because his offer had been turned down, but that he was so needful of Balaam's services that he would give him great rank and anything he asked for, if only he would come to Moab and call down a curse on Israel. Playing with temptation. This was a severe temptation to Balaam. All that he had to do to be wealthy for the rest of his life was to go into Moab and utter a few words against Israel in the name of God. What bothered him, however, was the question of just how long his life would last if he continued to disobey God's will. He hoped that circumstances would work out so he could please Balak without directly disobeying God. "I can't do anything God tells me not to do," Balaam told the princes. "Even if your king were to give me a whole house full of gold and silver, I cannot do any more or less than God allows. However, I will contact God tonight to see just how far he will allow me to go in having my own way. If it pleases you to stay overnight in our city, there is that good lodging in the adjoining place down the street. I shall be in touch with you tomorrow to report on what I'm allowed to do." Numbers chapter 2 verses 16 through 19. It was plain to see by the expression of the princes as they filed out that they were gravely disappointed in the answer they received. Balaam wondered later if they would ever return. Then God again spoke to Balaam. "If these men from Moab and Midian come to you in the morning, I won't stop you from leaving with them," God said. "If it turns out that you do go with them, remember that I am warning you not to say anything to them except what I tell you to say." Balaam disobeys. Balaam got up very early next morning to prepare for the possible return of the princes. When a little time dragged on and no one showed up, it seemed like agonizing hours. Balaam was worried. He desperately wanted to go to Moab because of the rich reward that could be his, but he feared to displease God. Finally, he reasoned around God's direct command by saying to himself, "God said if they came for me I should go with them, and they came for me yesterday." So he decided to go with the princes without waiting any longer for them to come to him. After all, the princes may have given up the idea of hearing from him, and most likely started preparing to return to their native lands. Balaam's decision was direct disobedience, because he was commanded originally not to go unless the princes came for him that next morning. "Go quickly to the lodging place of the princes," Balaam instructed a servant. "If they are yet there, tell them that they need to wait no longer for word from me. If they have already gone, overtake them and tell them that I shall join them." A little while later, the servant returned to report that the caravan was about to leave Pethor, and that the princes were surprised, but looking forward eagerly to Balaam joining them on the trail. Balaam instructed his servants to prepare a burro for him, and provisions for a long journey for 3 people, himself and his 2 servants. A short time later, Balaam's group joined the caravan on its way to Moab and Midian. Suddenly, Balaam's burro lunged off the trail and into a field, almost throwing its rider. Angered by the animal's unusual action, Balaam lifted the rod he was carrying and violently struck the burro on one of its flanks, to force it back unto obedience on the trail. The animal, however, kept on heading out into the field. Balaam was furious. His fury would have swiftly melted away if he could have been aware of what had startled the burro. An angel bearing a sharp sword was standing in the middle of the road. He had made himself visible only to the burro, which finally, because of Balaam's angry shouts and gouging strikes, started back towards the road. The angel swiftly moved and stationed himself before the donkey between two vineyard walls bordering a pathway leading back to the road. To bypass the angel, the burro lunged to the side, this time painfully jamming her master's foot and crushing it against the stone wall. Balaam vengefully struck the burro on the neck with his rod, and as the animal staggered fearfully forward, the angel again stationed himself further down the narrowing path. When the burro saw it could not get by the angel, it collapsed with fright and nervousness at being so close to the ominous figure of an angel of God. What little patience Balaam had left came to an abrupt end. He leaped up and brought his staff down on the animal's back with all his might. The burro speaks. With God, all things are possible. Mark chapter 10, verse 27. The burro opened her mouth and spoke her thoughts as though with a human voice. "What harm have I done to you to cause you to strike me so violently these 3 times?" the animal asked Balaam. Balaam stepped back, his mouth falling open in astonishment. It was too much for him to believe that this animal had actually spoken, yet he somehow felt obliged to reply. I struck you because you made me look ridiculous by tossing me around and shoving me against that wall. Besides, you are delaying me in an important trip." Balaam nervously but angrily answered, "If this staff of mine were a sword, I would jab it through you." Numbers chapter 2, verses 25 through 29. Balaam stared at the burro, wondering if he had been wrong in thinking that she had spoken in the first place. Then the animal's mouth quivered again, and Balaam was unhappily certain that it was actually the burro that was talking. "Years ago you chose me as your favorite animal for riding," the burro said. "I have served you faithfully all this time. Have I ever treated you so badly as you have treated me just now?" Balaam was a little stunned because of the human voice that came from the mouth of his burro. No," he finally managed to mutter. God gave Balaam the ability to suddenly see the angel. The prophet staggered back, his eyes popping out in amazement. In dreams and visions he had heard and seen angels, but this was the first time he had ever seen one while awake. Because of his feeling of guilt, he fell forward to the ground before the powerful being from God. "What good did it do to beat your donkey?" the angel asked Balaam. "I was standing in your path when the animal saw me there. She tried 3 times to dodge around me. Were it not so, I would have used this sword to strike you down, though I would have spared your donkey because of your disobeying God by joining the caravan returning to Moab." Groveling with his face in the soil, Balaam realized how wrong he had been in coveting the fortune offered to him to curse Israel. How unwise he had been in not fearing God enough to refuse to disobey. He realized he should have stayed at home, since the princes did not come for him in the morning after God instructed him. "I have sinned," he cried out. "I didn't know that God would go so far as to send one of his angels to slay me. Please spare me. If you don't want me to continue, please allow me to return to my home." "I shall spare you," the angel told Balaam, "but not to return to your home now that you have begun this journey. God permits you to rejoin Balak's caravan. However, when you arrive in Moab, you are to declare only the things I tell you to speak." God was giving Balaam another opportunity to refuse wealth and choose to obey him. If God had sent him back home, Balaam would not have had such another test of character. Balaam was greatly relieved not to be punished. He gladly agreed to God's terms, remembering the wealth of Balak. Accompanied by his 2 servants who had excitedly watched and heard this strange experience from only a short distance away, they hastily rejoined the caravan of princes heading back to Moab. After the caravan was well underway, a messenger using the fastest horse in the caravan was sent ahead to inform King Balak that the prophet Balaam was returning with his princes. Balaam continues lusting. "Why didn't you come to Moab the first time I sent for you?" King Balak asked a little impatiently when he met the prophet Balaam. "Didn't you realize that I am able to give you a high and honorable position in my government, as well as the treasure my men offered you?" Balaam was happy to hear of the treasure mentioned again. He had again begun to think more about it, and less about the warning God gave through his angel. "It was difficult for me to leave Pethor when your first caravan arrived," Balaam replied. "Here I am, at last. But I have no power to curse or to bless any nation unless God gives me that power. I can speak only what I am told to speak." Balaam was careful to speak in such a way that King Balak would not give up, but would keep trying harder to buy his services. He had become greedy again for the reward Balak had promised. 2 Peter chapter 2 verses 15 and 16, and Jude chapter 1 verse 11. As Balaam hoped, his statement did not discourage Balak. The king was convinced that the prophet somehow could manage to bring down God's wrath on Israel. He correctly believed that Balaam's statement perhaps meant that the price would be higher than anything Balak had already offered. Whatever the price, the king was willing to pay, and was pleased to take Balaam with him further into Moab, to the town of Kirjath Huzoth, which means a city of streets. Because the king and princes of Moab and Midian were present, there was a great celebration that night. Pleasure-seeking sheep herders and cattle drivers whooped and yelled as they moved in and out of the various establishments of the town. The festive feeling was further promoted when the king ordered his musicians, entertainers, and dancing girls to perform their best and loudest in the streets and marketplaces. Although Balaam realized that this festivity was at least partly in his honor, he felt uncomfortable. He reasoned he was better than those boisterous Moabites. He was even less at ease when he noticed a huge fire being built at a street intersection, and was told that the Moabites were about to sacrifice oxen and sheep to their gods, and that generous portions were being brought to him and the Midianite princes to eat. "We seek protection from our enemies by pleasing our gods with sacrifices," Balak explained to Balaam. "If you wish to offer sacrifices to yours at the same time on this altar, I shall see that you are supplied with any kinds of carcasses you need. Of course, I hope that you will at the same time implore God to curse Israel." "I am sorry to disappoint you," Balaam answered, "but God has forbidden me to do what I would like to do, so I cannot join you in this ceremony." So Balak was again disappointed.